and then I remember I had something to go out and get. But glad you're here tonight. Got my fam over here that filled me up with halls, so ought to be good to go. Maybe it'll last a while, longer than you planned for it to. If you got your Bibles, let's go back to that book of Revelation. As you turn back there, my thought for the day to share with you is just this. Sometimes in life we feel like things are going to pieces. Fair? And one of the things that, just is so intriguing to me, and I want to even do more of a study on it, but right now it's just kind of a generalized thing, noticing as I'm going through the Bible, picking up certain things it says, but it's just this whole concept of God building this world, the universe actually, on his wisdom. And trying to do some seeking out as far as, I'm content with that, but does the Bible say more than that about, the Scriptures? Do the Scriptures bear out even more of that and what that wisdom would be? And, you can just even read scientifically the whole concept of this spinning sphere that we're on called the Earth, molten lava. I've never been there, but supposedly in the center and everything that way. And then the gaseous pockets and how God keeps those separated, and Old Faithful that just blows its top every so often, but volcanoes that will shoot it up. And when they like that, all that's going on, all the rising of the tides and the up and down, and then these storms that take place and the mighty winds that blow and the cold up here and the cold down here. And it's just pretty amazing. And then this thing will tilt back and forth. And we're surely seeing the effect of that with the darkness and the changing of the time. And not that God did that. Man screwed up doing that, I think. But I say split the difference. Let's just cut it a half hour and we'll go from there and just leave it, But nonetheless, this whole tilting, and we know that somewhere around December 21st, it gets as far away as it can be, and then we'll start tipping back towards it and the days start getting longer. And not trying to be the least bit scientific with you, but just comprehending, man, that's just amazing in and of itself. But then to know that it's in this solar system we've got, and those things are doing, and the sun is still continually, and I've read before, and I can't even begin to break it down into common sense terms, but how much of it's burning off all the time. And just to comprehend light years, and that some of the stars that we think just started, no, they've been there for a long time. It just took that long for the light to reach our telescopes, And so all this stuff taking place just makes me marvel at God and what he's got going on. And it brings me back to, and the little kid song that I remember growing up singing about, he's got the whole world where? In his hands. Man, it's not just our world, it's the world. It's this universe that he created, and he placed it here. And as I said, my bent leans towards, I'm just in my whole heart and soul and spirit, really truly feel that it's God trying to reach out to the devil, to the fallen angel Lucifer, and reaching out to him and saying, hey man, come on. But he's also reaching out to us in our daily lives with a variety of things, from nature itself and even the changing of the seasons. And not because I like all of them, but nonetheless, he's still speaking. And then the amazing thing about after as fall happens now, and then the death takes place, and then the resurrection there in the spring. It's just phenomenal to me. But this concept for me today was just if he's got this in his hands, he's got the ability to hold things together. And if he can hold all of that together, he can certainly hold all this together. You and me, individually. Us as a church or a group of people too, but individually. And there's a lady in Julie and I that was a part of our church 25, 30 years ago, and went through a horrific divorce, had even been married to a preacher, at least a youth guy. And he ended up divorcing her because she couldn't have children. Didn't know that when they got married, but found out she couldn't have children. And he got involved with a high school girl, even though he was into his mid to late 20s, or towards 30 even, and got involved with this high school girl and ended up marrying her because she could. Really kind of, that sad, warped, oh, wow, man, I hate hearing that in the church, let alone when the world hears that. But she shared in our group one night about the fact of, sometimes I just feel like I'm going to pieces. And she came back later on to talk about how in the midst of that one night she did truly cry out to God and say, Lord, I feel like I'm just going to fragment and explode if you don't come and hold me together. And she said, I no more than said that, and I felt this presence come around me. and almost as if his arms were literally wrapping around me, holding me together, and I realized he's got this. And I share that with you because our world wants to drum up, I think, sometimes the drama to make us feel like everything's out of control. And I'm not telling you I can look at the world and the surrounding things anywhere in the world, let alone even what goes on here. And you don't have to read much of the news, hear much of the news to hear these horrific things. And like the church out there in Pittsburgh that was shot up, or the synagogue. And it's just like, whoa, what in the world is going on? And it's basically, it's evil. It's like we looked at Sunday, that if you don't acknowledge God, the earth itself gets sick, and it begins to make things clear that what evil does when evil's not restrained, or it has no restraint. And also then sometimes there's just things in our lives that seem to be out of control. And I just offer to you tonight that tell him, say, Lord, hold me together. Because he's glad to do that. And he's powerful enough if he can hold this universe together, that all of these things spinning at once. And man has tried with satellites, and they go out of orbit and out of control. And some of the spaceships, even with what's been able to be done, it doesn't always work. But God's got it handled, and he knows how to hold things in orbit and together at the same time. With that in mind, if you will, let's pray. Father God, I just give you thanks that there's things that sometimes you want us to ponder about you. You want us to, not just always questioning you, but, you're big enough to handle our questions. But more than the why gods, it's just thank you for that, your spirit that leads me to sometimes say, why not, God? Why not? Why haven't you let me experience all that my sins deserve? Why haven't you allowed me to experience the hunger and poverty that many nations live in, and people only live 30 years because that's all there is? And why do we get to be here in America, and how could we dare complain in comparison to our brothers and sisters equally loved by you in other places on this earth? And so I just bow and marvel at you. God, I pray I never lose the awe of you, the awe of God, in the sense that I pray that I don't get my life so on a program that I miss sometimes those things where you want my jaw to drop. And just as I marvel at you. And I pray for us as individuals in the same way, so that God, that in those times we can also remember, or we can remember those times so that we can also remember in those times when it does seem like things are going to pieces, that we could literally hear you say, I've got this. Trust me. And Lord, whether it's the carnival ride, and the spinning teacups, or gets on up till we become bigger and we ride those roller coasters that look like they're out of control, we trust the rails. God, we trust you. You know how to hold us on the rails. And sometimes you just want us to say, as we just turn it over to you, and instead of worrying, we trust. Tonight, Lord, I'm trusting you. I'm trusting that in spite of me, in spite of my inabilities and everything else, that God, tonight, that as you've entrusted these folks that have come, Lord, I want to pray that I live up to your trust in me by turning around and saying, God, not alone, but with you. So I ask that you would speak through me, and to answer everybody's request if they're saying, speak to me, and I join with them and saying, speak to me too. Because God, it's just so easy to get wrapped up in our world that we forget who the master of the universe is. But Lord, if you can control that, then you can control the things that come my way. But God, I know that you can't control me unless I invite you to. And I invite that so I don't self-destruct. I invite that so that I would continue to grow and be of benefit to others instead of in my selfishness self-destruct. Thank you tonight, Lord, for the peace that there can be in the midst of the kind of bone-chilling change in the temperature today and what's coming up. May we not allow the dreariness to, Lord, make us dreary, but may we see what's on the other side of the clouds. May we fly up through them, as some of us have had the privilege of doing on a jet, and see that, wow, it's only storming down below, but up here it's great. Tonight, God, I pray that I might be able to lead us into contemplating, why would you have John write these crazy things? And I say that parenthetically, but Lord, I do. Some of these things just seem so out there. But God, we promise, or you promise, that you have a reason and you're teaching us. So tonight, God, may we look at what some possibilities may be in regard to you and the temple. In the name of Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen. So if you've got your Bibles there in Revelation 11, we covered some of this last week, and I'm just going to read the first major paragraph here of it, okay? It says, I was given a reed, John talking here, John the Apostle, given a reed like a measuring rod, and I was told, go and measure the temple of God and the altar and count the worshipers there. Exclude the outer court, don't measure it because it's been given to the Gentiles. They'll trample on the holy city for 42 months. And I will give power to my 2 witnesses, and they'll prophesy for 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees and 2 lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. If anyone tries to harm them, fire comes from their mouths, devours their enemies. This is how anyone who wants to harm them must die. These men have power to shut up the sky so it won't rain during the time that they're prophesying, and they have power to turn the water into blood and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they want. And then it goes on to talk about them. And tonight, though, what I wanted to focus on was just his first part. He was given this reed. And typically a reed would be kind of like what we grew up around ponds. You'd call them cattails. You know, bamboo is actually a reed in some regards too. But the cattails were hollow in the center. And it's just such a striking thing of all that God could have done. He talks to John and he says, hey, here's this reed. I want you to go and measure the temple. I don't know about you, but we got lasers that will do that a lot easier, than what this would be. Because basically what you would have to do is, and I mean, I'm sure 3 to 4, maybe 6 feet long. So can you imagine laying it down, flipping it over, laying it down? That's 1, 2, 3, 4. And you start measuring this temple. And I presume it's the temple of God, but I mean, he just says that. Go measure the temple of God. Oh, and while you're at it, measure the altar. Then I want you to count those people, count the worshipers there, but don't count the outer courts, and you don't even need to measure it because it's been given to the Gentiles. And so I'm not questioning, does God have a meaning behind this tonight, but what I want to do is to take you on a little bit of a journey just as we might look at the temples. Not only do we have Revelation 11, but we also have then over here Revelation 21, 10 chapters later, he talks also about the New Jerusalem and another measuring contest that we might have here. And chapter 21 then in Revelation opens up, and I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven, the first earth, the one we're on right now, passed away. They died. They're gone. There was no longer any sea. I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared like a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, now, the dwelling of God is with men, and he will live with them. They're going to be his people. God himself will be with them and be their God. And then this is so cool. And he'll wipe away every tear from their eyes. There'll be no more death, mourning, crying, or pain, because the old order of things has finally died. It passed away. He who was seated on the throne said, I'm making everything new. And then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said, it's done. I'm the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To him who is thirsty, I'll give to drink without cost from the spring of water of life. He who overcomes, and that's one of those words that you need to circle every time it comes up, because that's what I think ought to be this driving force inside of us in our love of God is, man, I can overcome with you, Lord. I can overcome. He who overcomes will inherit all this, and I will be his God. He'll be my son. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those that practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all the liars, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. That is the second death. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls full of the 7 last plagues came and said to me, come, I'll show you the bride, the wife of the Lamb. And so he carried me away in the spirit to a mountain great and high and showed me the holy city, Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God. It shone like the glory of God, and its brilliance was like that of a very precious jewel, jasper, clear as crystal. It had a great high wall with 12 gates, and with the 12 angels at the gates, and on the gates were written the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. 3 gates on the east, the north, the south, the west. The wall of the city had 12 foundations. On them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. So a lot of 12s going on there. And then the angel talked with me. He had a measuring rod, but this one seems to be a little bit higher quality. It was of gold, a measuring rod of gold to measure the city and its gates and its walls. The city was laid out like a square as long as it was wide. It measured the city with the rod and found it to be 12,000 stadia. stadia, it says down there, that is about, anybody got their footnote? 1,400 what? Miles. I don't care how long this goldenrod was, man, that would still take a while to measure out, wouldn't it? 1,400 miles. Wow. And that was just one side. I'd have looked at it and said, yep, it's square enough. I'll just multiply this around, 1,400 miles. You think heaven's going to have trouble having enough room? 1,400 miles. This country is about 3,000 miles across, so half of this country from the East Coast to the middle, or the West Coast back. I don't even know, about 1,400 miles, I think, from top to bottom. That's amazing, isn't it? Yes. So, I mean, this huge city, and it's as wide as it is deep as it is tall. 1,400 miles up into the air. Man. So that's what it says. The walls were made of jasper, I missed that, 12,000 stadia in length and wide as it is high and long. He measured its wall. It was 144 cubits. You read on down there in the, footnotes, and it says that's about 200 feet. So this wall was 200 feet deep, man. I mean, that's a lot of concrete or whatever, isn't it, man? 144 cubits thick by man's measurement, which the angel was using. The wall was made of jasper, and the city of pure gold, pure as glass. Foundations of the city walls were decorated with every kind of precious stone. And he goes through and he names off things that I can't even say. And verse 21, the 12 gates were 12 pearls, each gate made of a single pearl, so it wasn't like an accumulation of pearls. It wasn't like the jewelers this time of year when they start getting ready for Christmas and they go, man, it's a 1-carat diamond. That means there were a lot of little carats in there, before to get to 1 full carat, No, these were single pearls. Man, I mean, that's amazing. And then he says this weird thing, after talking about the streets of gold. I didn't see, verse 22, I didn't see a temple in the city, because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple. And the city doesn't need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for the glory of the Lord gives it light, and the Lamb is the lamp. The nations will walk by its light, and the kings of the earth will bring their splendor into it. On no day will its gates be shut, for there will be no night there. Glory and honor of the nations will be brought into. Nothing impure, though, will ever enter it, nor will anyone who does what is shameful, deceitful, only those whose names are what? Written in the Lamb's book of life. If there's anything you want to make sure of, is that your name's in that book, because you don't want to miss out on this. Because if you're not a part of this, that means you're the other part, right? God's not going to send you to hell. It's because you chose not to go to heaven. Now, I share this with you because I think it's important that when we think about him measuring the temple, then it brings to my mind, just 10 chapters later, he's talking about in heaven. So he can't be talking about heaven, because in heaven there is no temple. How can that be? There's no need for it, because the presence of God is going to fill it. All 1,400 miles in every direction. The presence of God is that big. I want to take you on a journey back, kind of where we were this last Sunday with David, only I'm going to pick up here in chapter 6 to make it easy, 2 Samuel chapter 6, and I'm going to pick it up with it, because what I want to show you is this heart of David, because earlier when he talked about the key of David, I think I referenced this, and the sense that to me the key of David is that sing. He's a God worth writing songs about. He's a God worth singing to, making music with instruments of every kind and everything there can be. David had that heart after God, and in spite of the fact that he was far from perfect, and we talked about one of his big sins, and that was actually multiple sins, because it lust to adultery to pregnancy to then murder, and then to cover up. But then we looked at the end of it, his life. Then what he did, he counted the fighting men, and God was like, you don't need to, but he did. And so David had his faults, but man, he also had this heart. And for any of you that are like me, that you recognize, and nobody needs to rub your nose in your faults, I want you to see this part of it, that, that God's not suddenly stunned that we struggle. What he's stunned about is when we don't receive Jesus Christ, when we need him. And the second thing is when we don't allow Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit to continue to transform us. I think that's stunning to him in the wrong direction, because it's like, hey, like Peter wrote, you have all that you need for life and godliness in him. 2 Peter chapter 1. You have everything that you need for life and godliness, that you can participate in the divine nature and escape the corruption of the world. He said, you and I, anybody that's a believer in Jesus Christ, that's accepted Christ as their Lord and Savior, you have it already there. So what's he implying? Not everybody taps into it. You have it all, but you got to be willing. David had, even before the crucifixion of Christ, the cross that we, recognize what took place there, before the Holy Spirit was granted and given, that we were told that God could be our Father. Even before that happened, David had this heart that wanted to worship God. And so we read in chapter 6 that David, again, brought together out of Israel chosen men, 30,000 in all. And I'm not going to take time. I need to speed this up a little bit. But what he wants to do is go bring the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. And he goes to do so, but he fails to look at the scriptures to see what it says of how to do it. And so they put it on this cart where it was supposed to be carried by the priest on poles. And this guy that was a priest reached out to steady it when the oxen stumbled or whatever. It hit a pothole or something like that, And when he reached up there, the guy instantly just, poof, was annihilated. And David stopped the parade, man, and said, ah. And they rolled the ark back into whoever was the closest, the barn there the guy had. And David went home mad at God because why'd you kill this guy? But in the meantime, he did some digging and found out, oh, man, I didn't do it the right way. And he got things kind of healed up with God. So let's, if you will, let's pick it up in verse 12. Now the King David was told, the Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom. That'd be a cool name, wouldn't it? Hey, man, what's your name? Obed? Obed-Edom, they call me, and everything that he has because of the ark of God. So the thing here is David heard about this guy who they parked the ark in his barn. And man, suddenly Obed-Edom and everything that he has is blessed. So David went down and brought up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord, see, they understood and they picked up on this, had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fatted calf. Now, I don't know if any of you ever done any butchering at home. I'm thankful we didn't. We took him to guys like Julie's dad that, would take care of it. But I've had a few hog roasts, and the guys wanted to be real men. Arr, let's go out. There's nothing pretty about gutting something, man. I mean, there's just not. But what I want you to think about is they took 6 steps and stopped for David to go ahead and to sacrifice this bull. And I mean, if their knives were sharp and they're really good, golly, you're talking a minimum of 30 or 40 minutes. That's just to gut the thing and then to get it ready and throw. You got to have some fire along the line. And I mean, they just have torches that they could just light up, and no LP gas or anything like that. So can you imagine this? When they'd taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fatted calf. David then, wearing a linen ephod, danced before the Lord with all of his might, and while he and the entire household of Israel brought up the ark of the Lord with shouts and sounds of trumpets. I mean, I'm like, how long did this take? You with me? I mean, let's be real. That sometimes we need to read the scriptures from a standpoint of what did they really do there? Well, as the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, we got this milk cow, the daughter of Saul. She watched, and she thought that he was undignified and despised him. And we got songs about that David said, I'll be even more undignified. And anyway, they brought the ark of the Lord in verse 17 and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it. David sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before the Lord. So he'd already done all these others, and he did a whole bunch more. He said after he had finished sacrificing the burnt offerings and the fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord Almighty and gave a loaf of bread, cake of dates, you can have mine, and a cake of raisins to each person. The whole crowd of Israelites, both men and women, and all the people went to their home. His bakers must have been busy, huh? That's a whole lot of fig Newtons, And when David returned home to bless his household, then the daughter of Saul came out to meet him. How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, disrobing in the sight of the slave girls. Basically, she saw the girls looking at David, and she goes, man. So she cops an attitude. She went out there worshiping God, was she? That's what happens when we fail to worship God. We nitpick at people that are worshiping. in chapter 11, what did it say? Go measure it and then count the worshipers. I just think that it's important to know that not everybody that's there is worshiping. In other words, I think that the way we'd say it in our language today is go count the true worshipers. But that brings me to question myself. Am I a worshiper or a true worshiper? I can show up at worship service, but not to ever worship, right? What's a true worshiper do? Jesus said there's coming a day when the true worshipers will, according to what he told the woman at the well in John 4, true worshiper will worship me in S, spirit, T, truth. There's coming a day, because they used to argue about which mountain was the best one to worship God on, and he said there's coming a day when the true worshipers will worship me in spirit and truth. He didn't say they'll worship me if they like the music. He didn't say they'll worship me if it's fast music. They didn't say if it's really slowed down, if it's really repeated a bunch, if it's only sung once. I mean, none of that was talked about. It's about spirit and truth. People that put their heart into it, as what David did. I mean, he lost himself in the midst of worship. And what was the whole point? David wanted to be as close to God as he could be. He wasn't satisfied the ark was parked, but it wasn't parked in his driveway. And David goes, dang, I want some of that. Not just the blessing. I want to be close to God. Now, that to me is a key to worship, okay? And I want you to consider that, because how do you worship? Do you want to be close to God? Do you want to worship out of the closeness you already experienced, but you want to get even closer? Do you want to experience God and say, I don't want what's in me, I want more? Not more blessing than what we think in our stuff in America and our life. No. I want more God in me. That's what worshipers do. Is you are so great, how would you even put up with me? But God, if there's more, I want to know more. And I share that with you, and I know this is a message that should be on Sunday morning so more people get it, but maybe if we get it, they will. Because see, I think we're so laid back and California cool about worship sometimes. And please don't misunderstand. Because I'm not saying that you're worshiping more if you're doing Christian calisthenics. And I'm not saying you're worshiping more if you're shouting to the Lord. I mean, that's just it. I want to be careful setting forth here's the posture, because it's a heart issue. Because it's spirit and truth. You see, and I can't judge whether you're really worshiping or kind of worshiping. Nor can you of me. But that's just it. We're not supposed to judge the people around us. We're supposed to judge ourselves. And are we those that worship in spirit and truth? Do we really want God to be closer to us? Then don't leave him at church. But sometimes I think we really kind of like to believe we'll leave God parked at the church because now we'll go live our life and we know where to come back when we need him. David said, no, I don't want it that way. I want you in my life, God. I want you in my life. And what this began to do was to stir in David not only that day, but let's read chapter 7 here. After the king was settled in his palace, and the Lord had given him rest on all of enemies, and I think it's just so interesting, it flows right into this. He gave him rest from all of his enemies around him. That's amazing, a whole nation that nobody even fights you because they just believe there's no use even trying. He said to Nathan the prophet, who said? David. David called Nathan the prophet in. He said, hey man, I've been thinking. Here I am living in a palace of cedar. What's that mean? He had paneling on his walls, is what it means. Let's go back to the 60s, right? How many people have had paneling in their house? How many would never want to do that again? You know how expensive that stuff is these days? But David's living, he said, man, I've got this house with paneled walls. Cedar it is. Here I am living in a palace of cedar while the ark of God remains in a tent. David, it's okay. What difference does it make? And basically that's what God says to him. That's what probably his friend said to him is, hey man, God's a big God. He can do what he wants to do. If he's satisfied at the tent, man, he likes just camping out. But I want to ask you, have you ever thought, I've got all this, but this is all I'll give God? Because that's what David's doing here. He's not comparing himself to anybody else. He's comparing himself and saying, man, it's not fair. I live in some regards better than you. And I know, God, you're just a spirit. I want your presence close to me, but I feel that this is backwards. I've got all this and you've got that. Have you ever had that? Where you wonder, why does God bless me so much and have I blessed him back? Does God treat me better than what I deserve to be treated? Does God shower me more with luxuries than what I ever even appreciate, let alone, do you ever want God's life to be better? That sounds funny because God's self-sustaining, but true worshipers will worship in spirit and truth. And David came to the truth of the matter going, this really just doesn't look right. I've got this nice palace because I'm king, but I know I'm still just a shepherd inside and a warrior. But I know this is the Almighty God, and he's out here in a tent. I want the rest of the world to know that the one and only God that exists is next to me, and I want to create something that would represent him. That's what's on David's heart. So he didn't leave his worshiping only when they were rolling the ark in or carrying it in. He didn't leave his worship only on the Sabbath when they're supposed to worship. David was worshiping even as he lay in his bed at night and gets to thinking about, how come I've got it so good? This is a kid that grew up out there counting the stars as he watched the sheep. This is a kid that had beat off a lion and a bear, with his club, killed him, grabbed it by the nape of the neck and bam, smacked it. But he gave God the credit for it. And this is David going, man, that was a good life. But here I am, king of God's people and living in this palace, and I've got everything I want. I'm at peace with all my enemies. Dang, God, I just don't think it's fair. So he calls Nathan in and tells him that. Nathan replied to the king, whatever you have in mind, go ahead and do it, for the Lord is with you. But then that night the word of the Lord came to Nathan, and he said, go and tell my servant David. And man, we can read that, and it sounds like it would be dismissive, but it's not. It's so cool. God calling David his servant. Do you serve God enough that he would call you that? Because that's a title of honor in the house of God. You see, I think we got it backwards because we think we've arrived if somebody serves us. I've always said after working in food service that I think every kid in high school ought to have to spend 2 years in food service just to understand life. So you serve people and you understand what it's like when people don't appreciate. You understand when they don't deserve and you still treat them nice. But God called him his servant. I want to ask you again, does God call you his servant? Is that a title worth living up to? Anyway, he said, go tell my servant David, this is what the Lord says. Are you the one to build me a house to dwell in? I've not dwelt in a house from the day I brought the Israelites up out of Egypt to this day. I've been moving from place to place with a tent as my dwelling. Whenever I have moved with all the Israelites, did I ever say to any of their rulers whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, why have you not built me a house of cedar? God never complained. Now then, tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty says. I took you from the pasture, following the flock, to the ruler over my people Israel. I've been with you wherever you've gone. I have cut off your enemies from around you. Now I will make your name great like the names of the greatest men on the earth. And I will provide a place for my people Israel and will plant them so that they can have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. Wicked people will not oppress them anymore as they did in the beginning and have done ever since the time I appointed leaders over my people Israel. I will also give you rest from all your enemies. The Lord declares to you. Now this is quite a message coming to, Nathan, just to hear all this. Just a second, God, I'm taking it down. Because the prophet always would speak what God had said. But imagine David hearing this. So he said, the Lord declares to you, the Lord himself will establish a house for you. That's about like God, isn't it? I want to build you a house. I'm so stinking flattered by that, David. I'm going to build your house. But he's not talking about sticks. He's talking instead about what? A name and a household. I'm going to establish a house for you. When your days are over and you rest with your fathers, I'll raise up your offspring to succeed you, who will come from your own body. I'll establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name. I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I'll be his father. He'll be my son. And when he does wrong, I'll punish him with the rod of men, flogging inflicted by men. But my love will never be taken away from him, as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. In other words, Jesus is going to come from you, man. That's the ultimate Lord, right? The ultimate shepherd. So Nathan told David everything. And then what we have next is David's prayer. And it's a cool thing to read, but if you will, jump on over to, I'm going to skip Kings. Let's go to Chronicles, okay? And 2 Chronicles 17. Really, let's see, let me look here a second. 17. It's a kind of a retell of this. So 17 starts out and deals with God basically telling him the same thing. And then picking up then in verse 10, in the middle of it, because there's a paragraph split there, he said, I'll declare to you that the Lord will build a house for you. When your days are over, you'll go to be with your fathers. I'll raise up your offspring to succeed you. Basically the same thing. Verse 12 said, he is the one who will build a house for me, and I'll establish it. So again, we have David's prayer. And then, if you will, let's go on over to 21. And the reason I want to hit on 21, it's the last week when I looked at it was in the last chapter of 2 Samuel. This is another telling of it where it's chronicled what the kings did. And so this is where David counts the fighting men. There's a few more details in this than what I shared with you Sunday, but basically the same thing. And but I want to pick it up down here in verse 23, because I just want to refresh you as we get going, because this is about what? The temple tonight, God's temple. Go and measure it. Go and count the worshipers. So in 24 or 23, Araunah said to David, take it, because he's wanting to stop this plague. And he said, I'm going to offer sacrifices here. And so Araunah once again says, take it, my lord, king. Do whatever pleases you or him. Look, I'll give you the oxen for the burnt offering, the threshing sledges for the wood, and the wheat for the grain offering. I'll give you all this. That's a huge sacrifice, man, when I know as a farmer, when you're just giving it all up. And he's not doing it for God, he's doing it for David. But King David replied to Araunah, and again, this is just priceless. You talk about something, if you want to hang something on your mirror to live up to, try this. I insist on paying the full price. I will not take for the Lord what is yours. I will not sacrifice a burnt offering that costs me nothing. So David paid Araunah 600 shekels of gold for the site. Wow. I looked up today's price per ounce of gold. That would equate out to $294,480. Off the moment, just the spur of the moment. He said, I'm not going to give that which costs nothing. And he assessed the land, assessed what was done here, and he said, here you go, $300,000. Boom. And I said, no, man, I'll give it to you. So do you see two people here willing to give a sacrificial offering? Is that not stunning? One's doing it for the king, a man that he truly is endeared to and admires. The other is the king that this guy's admiring unto God, that's the real king. And he said, I'm not giving to him which cost me nothing. Araunah goes, but that's okay, I'll give it to you. And he goes, nope, I'm going to pay for it. So $300,000 more or less later, David buys it. So it said, David paid Araunah 600 shekels of gold for the site. David built an altar to the Lord there. He sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. He called on the Lord, and the Lord answered him with fire from heaven on the altar of burnt offering. Kind of like Elijah. Boom! Fire from heaven. Then, and this is the part that I didn't get to share last Sunday, the Lord spoke to the angel and he put his sword back into its sheath. So God responded to David's sacrifice and stopped this plague that David had brought on because he counted the fighting men. And he said, at that time, verse 28, when David saw that the Lord had answered him on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite, he offered sacrifices there. The tabernacle of the Lord which Moses had made in the desert and the altar of burnt offerings were at that time on the high place of Gibeon. But David could not go before it to inquire of God because he was afraid of the sword of the angel of the Lord. chapter 22, verse 1, then David said, the house of the Lord of God is to be here, and also the altar of burnt offering for Israel. A lot of people don't put two and two together. It's even believed, historians believe, and those that have studied the ground and everything that way, honestly believe that this is the site that, go clear back to Genesis, when God asked a guy named Abraham that he promised he'd have a son. He waited 25 years to have the son. The son, probably 10, 15 years later, is now grown up, and God told Abraham to what? Sacrifice to me your only son. Sacrifice him to me. And they went a 3-day journey from where Abraham was and went up this mountain of God, and they went up on it to take the sacrifice. I share that with you because it's believed it's one and the same places with centuries in between. But here, David is now going, I want to pay you for this. And in fact, as God answered that and stopped the plague, David turned around and said, this will be the place where I build this for God. Pretty cool. Not just the temple, but also the altar for the sacrifices. And I don't know, I mean, that just kind of is pretty cool to me. And the amazing thing is, Jesus Christ wasn't sacrificed far from this very point, outside the city walls. Jesus was killed and sacrificed. Little doo-doo, huh? Or woo-doo, 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 whatever. But we go from Abraham sacrificing his son and God saying, that's enough, now I know, to David saying, Lord, I love you and I'm going to buy this. Here's my offering and my sacrifice. Now I'm going to buy and I'm going to build the temple here, to Jesus Christ and being that same one and only son that gets sacrificed later on. Go measure the temple. Count the worshipers there, the real ones. I'm out of time. I really like to go on because there's more to this. Not tons more, but it's amazing what David did in his offering to God. Again, by today's prices, get this, man. David gave gold toward this building that he couldn't build, valued at $147 billion in today's money and today's gold. $147,240 million worth of gold. One man. I'd say that's an offering, wouldn't you? Silver, he gave 75 million pounds of silver. That would value $17,400 million worth of silver at today's price of just $14.50 an ounce. Sacrifice, worship. I know there's no way for us to buy our way into heaven. And there's no way for us to somehow or another buy God's favor. But let me tell you what, there's still something that I believe revs God's jets when in spirit and truth we make a sacrificial offering because we want our world to know this is my God. It's so different than going to church. It's so different than singing songs that you like. True worshipers will worship in spirit and truth because they will say, this is my God. And worship is not just singing and posture. Those things are involved. But it's the heart, the mind, the soul, the will. It's unto God, and it is including, why wouldn't you want to bring an offering with that? Because when you look at the offering that he gave with Jesus Christ on the cross, how are you ever going to top that? So, obviously, the New Testament application, Paul said it more than once. What's the temple of God? Us. You are the temple of God. So if God told John to measure your temple, how big would it be? If he told John, count how many times Steve worships this week, how many times would it be? How many times did you worship God today before you ever got to church and any song was even sung? Because every one of us have that opportunity. Because God doesn't dwell in buildings built by hands, but he does dwell in the hearts of men that his Son's blood have made pure. Do you believe for a second that the devil wants us to be busy with everything other than worshiping God? Because I do. I think he wants us to categorize worship as being 20 minutes on a Sunday or Wednesday, or maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours at a concert, a good Christian concert. And God goes, that's the best you got for me? So tonight, I want to encourage you, you measure the temple. You count the worship. And does worship count you to you? Father and God, as we bow tonight before you once again, not only in prayer, but as we prepare to receive, not give a sacrifice, but to receive that which reminds us of the sacrifice that God, you gave in giving up your one and only Son, but Jesus, that you gave in honor of the Father, God, and your love for us, being caught and trapped in our sin, with best efforts never being able to counterbalance, doing enough good to overcome the bad. God, tonight as we prepare to receive your sacrifice again, may we worship you. May it carry over to where, Lord, whatever we hear on the radio on the way home doesn't get bigger than what you are. Whatever happens as we get home in the conversation at the end of the day with, Lord, whether it be the TV or whether it be with ourselves or whether it would be with families, may we not lose track of you. When we lay down tonight, God, may we not just say our now I lay me's before we go to sleep in case we die, but may we worship you. May we want, Lord, to give you even a better place to dwell than what you had today. But Lord, fessing up honestly, Holy Spirit, please, Holy Spirit of God, come and cleanse this temple. That at the very least, no matter how big or small it is, it would be clean. And not only cleanse it, but then I pray that not only, God, could I meet you there, but that I would come often. And that I would be in a continual building program, enlarging it. Giving you your rightful place, loving you with all my heart, my soul, my strength. Lord, that's what you deserve. So tonight, God, I ask your blessing on my brothers and sisters that are here. We may not be large in number, but God, wow, if you made a dent in our hearts and souls, the world will never be the same. May we make room for you. May we make you count as we worship you. In Jesus' name, amen.